Our world has changed really in the last 5 to 10 years. It's evolving every day.
This is where we have to transition to, how do you make sense of this?
I think the most important thing that you can be doing now is becoming informed.
This is for everybody. It is a way to have balance in your life.
Really making sure we're helping the employers here.
You are not alone in this process. So this is kind of the time where we bring it, what we've talked about, Sean and I, is forms versus humans, okay? So you deal with humans. I have kind of a human approach since I started the agency. This is where we have to transition to, how do you make sense of this? And I think the great part about this is, if you think back over the last year and what you had to do in healthcare reform, a lot of it is mandated that you had to do it on your own, all right? So Paul mentioned the Hpid fiasco, right? So the government has to certify that you are a legitimate human that they should do business with first, and that doesn't work. And then once you get through that process, if you get through, then you got to go through another piece, right? So the good news about this piece is that to outsource the basic components of being in compliance are relatively inexpensive, okay? So we're going to talk about that piece, and because a lot of you have to sell that up the chain internally. So I'm going to talk about our best practices step by step. I'm going to talk about a timeline, which will have a successful action plan to make sure whatever path you have to choose, you have a step-by-step process that you can start now that'll make sure you get home by the end of the year, okay? And then we got to talk about cost. As Sean said, part of our responsibility is vetting the market, all right? You got a lot of new players in the market. You have a lot of practice areas that are now dipping their toes in the other pond. So who's going to pull them together? Who's going to look at cost? Because, just like the coalition, all of you are here. You get preferred pricing. Exact same thing is going on with healthcare reform reporting and managing this data. Exact same thing, okay? So there's power in negotiation to be had. Okay, so obviously my message consistently for 5 years on healthcare reform has been just take a step back, just breathe. You are not alone in this process. The idea coming out of this, and I think it's clarified by reporting, is that it's not good enough now to just know that you're in compliance. Healthcare reform reporting now basically says you've got to have a system in place that tells you when these people start to bubble up, because you may not be facing, the doomsday penalties that we've talked about over the last couple of years, but you have to report to the government. Documenting this best attempt to figure this out, you've got to put it in writing, put it on a shelf. It'll make you sleep better at night to know when somebody asks you, are you in compliance? It's right here, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, how are you gonna pull together all of these various practice areas, okay? And we'll talk to you about how we think your consultant fits into this, all right? And it's okay to go to them and say, what's our action plan? So here's the puzzle pieces. So who you got? You got payroll, we've talked about that. You've got various payroll vendors, some of you do payroll in-house. You've got to be able to start talking to them about the data. It's all about data. It's all about where you find information, and payroll obviously has a lot. Now you got benefit systems, you got payroll, now they have their new products. We want to sell you a product, but some of them want to package it together. Oh, well, we can do healthcare reform reporting for you, but you're going to have to give us some other stuff, right? So remember that all of that's leveraged. It all can be negotiated. There's a process in there, right? That's called competition, and there is a lot of competition. The other thing to know is if you hear sales reps come in and say, we've been in this business 20 years. Oh, really? 20 years in ACA reporting. Let's back up a little bit. You may have been in payroll for 20 years or HRIS, but this is brand new. These systems, even the best companies that we're vetting, haven't even fully tested their systems yet, right? Because there's no data. It's not even up and running. So when they say that to you, just take it with, an understanding that this is a new industry, okay? You got to manage your HRIS system. Some of you don't have them, some of you are doing it, some of you have separate ones, some of them are blended together with payroll. You got to start talking to these puzzle pieces to see what kind of gaps are identified for this particular piece of reporting. You got insurance carriers. Obviously, most of you are self-funded. Still got to be talking to the carriers, right? They don't want to forget about you. Capital Blue Cross doesn't want you to forget about them. So they're going to be in the space. They're going to be talking about how they can support the process and what they can add to this piece. Accounting services, you have auditors, big, small. It's IRS requirement. You got to get those people on the phone and you got to say, what's your plans? You know, what do you think we should do? I mean, these are part of the people that you have to involve in the process. So you got your ACA vendors, you got these companies that are popping up all over the place that can start to tie all of this together, all right? And they do various components along the ACA kind of bubble. So vetting them, because again, all of them are new, right? They're all developing software that says this is the greatest software. It's got dashboards that'll pop up right in front of you and show you which employees are getting close to being eligible for benefits. Well, we're not there yet, you know, there's no references. They can't give you a list of 10 clients that they handled for the last 5 or 10 years, okay? So just keep that in mind. You gotta get past the sales reps to the techies and the data. The actual filing of the forms, right? So who's gonna file these forms? Who's gonna populate them? Are you gonna send them? Who's gonna print them? Who's gonna mail them? All decisions that have to be made. All right, so your employee tracking. It's no longer good enough to say, I have a spreadsheet, we worked with a consultant, they say we're fine. We only have a couple of people. You gotta actually have a data management in place that goes back and finds these people so you can print the forms, all right? All right, and then compliance documents. So I'm gonna talk a little bit in the end about compliance, wrapping all of this up. Once you decide on your best practices and what you're doing, just like you've done all along, you know, your minimum value calculation, your contribution calculation to make sure that you're meeting that 9.5% threshold. All of you, if I asked you, I think that you would say, we've been through it, we're good. Have you documented it? Have you documented the process? This is what our 9.5 of our lowest paid employee, if that's the way that you chose to go, this is what we charge. Should be in a binder, should be in a document so you can prove that your best attempt to comply with the law. Okay, so here's where we fit in as a consulting firm. You all have consulting firms, and you should not be ashamed about going back to them and saying, we expect you in some way to help us pull these pieces together. So this is part of a takeaway that you have kind of looking at a step-by-step process. So this first step, identifying all practice areas, okay? So you got to pull all of these pieces together, your vendors, their products offered, their contacts, okay? So first piece, if this is you and this isn't a consultant, you got to know who the players are, you know? Who's doing your payroll? Who's the human being, right? What products are they offering? Have they already contacted you? You got to start getting these things out there. And cost. Remember, it's negotiable. It's a competitive market right now. So don't feel locked in because you have a payroll company that says, well, clearly we're the ones that are going to handle this, and this is how much we're going to charge you. Just put the brakes on, right? Because there's an RFP process. Anything can change, right? So you want to keep that mentality. Step 2, conduct individual conference calls with each practice area to identify their ACA reporting capabilities, to identify every gap, okay? Because you've got different practice areas that may say, hey, we can supply this information, but this reporting and those tax forms are new. So you got to have these calls with these practice areas to determine the gaps, all right? Consultant's responsibility or yours, all right? So you either got to go to your consultant and say, are you preparing this action plan, or this is obviously your to-do list coming out of today. The next step, you got to demo each system to evaluate it, okay? You have to spend the time, or somebody else has to spend the time for you. So when we're spending the time, these are the things that we're evaluating. Their price, their service technology, their implementation support, all right? Because the sales rep is not going to be in your life once you sign on board. You're going to have to deal with how they implement, how you exchange data, and you have to be involved in that process. Are they going to be there for you? Is that going to cost extra? You know, those types of questions. Reputation and stability, all right? You're going to see some startups that came just out of the blue. Where did they come from? You know, where's that data? The fit for you as a client. You don't need to rush out and spend all this money on a third-party vendor if you do have, after it's vetted, a payroll company that can handle the basic tasks. They can install their software or their program to allow you to accurately track looking back. They can give you the dashboards that tell you where you have red flags, and they can file the tax forms for you. If they can do it, you don't need an ACA, you don't need a separate vendor to do it for you, but it has to be vetted. And then the transparency, the contract flexibility. We see a lot of companies offering 1-year deal, and this is what it looks like if you're going to sign on for 3 years. You know, all of that is negotiable. All right, so these are the kind of things that you have to start asking questions on if you're going it alone on this. Again, I talked about the RFP. So that's the process that we're entering in right now with our clients. We are looking this, we usually have the busy season 1-1. Now we got to do it in perpetuity, okay? We're conducting full RFPs on specifically the ACA solution, all right? And that's going to be inviting everybody that's deemed reputable by us or by you as you step out. You're going to have your current vendors who are jockeying for position, and they're going to have pieces, and you're also going to have outside vendors that may want to participate in the bid process. So we see a lot of the discrepancies in that in the price that they're charging. Okay, so that we got to conduct that RFP. We're going to negotiate it just like we would with carriers, right? You got to get everybody together. They got to put their solution on the table, and it's got to be negotiated. Your price is $1.35 per employee per month. Market's at 75 cents. That seems fair to me, all right? So, that's a piece of it, either on your plate or on your consultant's plate. Recommends, this is a big part of our, what we've seen and heard from other clients over the years. So if you have a consultant that's working for you, the expectation is not that they give you a spreadsheet and say, these are the 37 carriers that can handle your ACA reporting. Throw a dart, get back to us, and we'll be happy to take 10% for pulling this in a spreadsheet together. You need a recommendation, okay? So from your consultant and pushing them, that's their responsibility, right? They're cutting those checks on a monthly basis. If they're vetting the market for it, have them give you a recommendation when it's all said and done. What do you think we should do based on all of these practice areas? Managing implementation process. That's the techies talking, right? So if you're in a situation where your data is not clean right now, it has to get turned into clean, even if you outsource. That's going to involve some people internally, you working on your data, cleaning it up, getting it into fields, and then somebody's got to manage that process. Somebody's got to make sure that people aren't just blaming each other back and forth, because that's how a 1-month implementation slips into a 1-year implementation, which a lot of people have been through on the HRIS side. The last piece, the full compliance audit, okay? So I'll just show you this for a second. So this is what we do for all of our clients. So if the Department of Labor comes in, so this is what we're doing for our clients where we really feel that it has to be. This is Department of Labor ready, off the shelf. Here, you don't think we're complying with all the laws that they dump on your desk on a weekly basis? This is it. And we hope that it just ends up as a paperweight, but the idea is that it makes you feel better when you're actually documenting it. Healthcare reform is no different. So when we come through this process with our clients, there's going to be a whole section that's added that says this is what we've done all along this process. And if you want to come in and you want to start checking if we've complied along the way, it's right here in writing. It's tab 3. Don't waste my time. Go in the other room, and handle that, okay? All right, so a timeline to kind of coincide with what I just talked about with best practices. So you got April to May, identify your practice areas, conduct conference calls, demo this availability. So you got 2 months to basically decide, who are the players, who's currently doing this for you, what are they offering, and kind of move forward from there. May to June, this is where the best practice, our recommendations is you put out an RFP. And it doesn't always have to mean something official where it's 400 pages and you're posting it. I mean, obviously, most of you have been through various levels of RFPs. You just need to have a process in which you're fully vetting the market, and think of the RFP because I think most people are comfortable with that terminology, all right? And then just remember to negotiate. Remember to negotiate that solution for going forward because nothing is in stone, all right? So this June, July, this is the recommendations. You make this decision by July. Your client decision on the ACA solution. So if you're done by July, at that time period, you've got 6 months to implement. The average time that we're kind of hearing that we feel comfortable talking about implementation is 12 to 16 weeks, all right? So if you got 12 to 16 weeks to get your stuff together. Now, we were on a call the other day where one of the firms, the ACA firms, said that they're going to take on clients after October, but they are not guaranteeing that they can file forms for people who come to them after October. And the way that I would just relate this to you is, if any of you have ever been in a situation where you've conducted open enrollment on December 18th, and then expected member cards to be in hand on January 1, it's not going to happen, right? Because 80% of you renew on calendar year, you understand that piece. All right, January to March, this is cleanup. This is assuring that you're actually getting these things filed, that they're accurate on time and they're out the door. All right, so this is your timeline. It's in your takeaways. Obviously, very important. Equally as important, all right, just as a takeaway here. A lot of prices falling around, but this is kind of just a high level to get to wrap your head around it. Level one, and these build on each other, okay? So if you just want to go out there in the market and you want to get a vendor to create and distribute your IRS forms, all right? Right now we're seeing 25 cents to 40 cents per employee per month, about $3 to $5 per employee per year. If that's all that you need when you go through this process. You come down to level two. That's that vendor's creating the forms, but also tracking backwards. It's the employee eligibility tracking. That means you're actually going to have software that you have a dashboard that pops up that says you're good or you're not good. We got some people that are redlining based on the hours, all right? Level one and level two, regardless of where you end up getting this, have to be outsourced. It's responsible to outsource it. It's less than half a point of your overall benefit spend. Think of it like healthcare reform taxes, death and taxes. This is part of it, this is best practice, all right? Where you end up, it depends. But when you look at cost, 60 cents to $1.75, that's for both of those things, very, very reasonable. 1,000 life case, 10, 15 grand, right? So overall, when you think about your overall benefit spend, what your organization spends on healthcare, absolutely, and on a personal note, since most of this falls on your individual desks, this is going to save you a lot of headaches to go this way. You're still going to have work to do, but level one and two. Now level three, this is essentially going to be your own situations. This last piece that comes in, which is the full service vendor consultant, this is somebody that's going to come in and kind of manage the whole process. Most of you, now this is expensive if you don't have it now. That's why that price is there. Most of you, in some regard, pay consultants right now that the expectation should be that they're in that space. They're filling it for you. So it's a bucket that's already being compensated for. But if you don't have it now, there are very good firms that will come in and wrap all three of those levels together, and that's the price. Now the last piece there is implementation costs, and this is really going to be a very individual by client, because you're all in different levels of data, right? So the implementation costs are certainly going to lead to some things over the course of time, and that's going to vary from client to client basis. All right, so I'll close in this. As you go along, part of our commitment to being involved in the coalition is that we know that sometimes every time you pick up the phone with your consultant, the price tag starts moving. Don't ever be afraid to just call us on a one-off, all right? If you have a question about something that pops up with healthcare reform, certainly we're there as a resource for you, and we feel like it's our responsibility in partnering with the coalition, because we obviously also are members. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.